Okay, we are live.
Yay!
Yay! Let me make sure you're showing up, Tammy. Okay, I think you're okay, yeah. Yay.
Yeah. All right.
Well, hello. Okay, yeah. So you got your iPad
Yeah,
fixed
got
up.
it. Got it. I'm ready.
You're free. Okay. Okay, sweet. So every I'm so excited to talk with you about this really important topic. Actually, we have a couple people joining us now.
Cool.
And so we're going to talk about music rooted in racism. We're going to talk about the implications on our clients. We're going to talk about what kind of alternatives that you can use
Hmm.
and just kind of increase awareness around this topic because my mind has been blown by a lot of music that I've seen in certain lists and a lot of music that I've researched the historical context of. So I think this will be a really enriching discussion, and we're really looking forward to you joining us. I'm going to introduce to you Tammy Flovin. Is it Flovin or
Hi.
yeah, Flovin, not Flovin, right?
Right, Floven.
Tammy Flovin. She is a music therapist in South Carolina,
Hmm.
and
Yes.
she has so generously offered her time to spend with us and be present with us as we kind of go through some of these questions and
Hmm.
figure out what can we do as professionals um, in order to stop the perpetuation of racism. We can definitely start with music since we
Hmm.
have that's our wheelhouse.
That
So
is our wheelhouse. Yeah.
Tammy works at a hospital in South Carolina, right? In
Correct. Yes. We were temporarily furloughed, but we will be back soon. But yeah, in Charleston, South Carolina. So,
Charleston. Okay,
hmm,
great. Great.
yes.
Um, and so, Tammy, if you don't mind telling us a little bit about your background and
Mm-hmm.
you're a music therapist in Charleston, South Carolina. You work at a hospital. Where are you from? And just tell us anything you want for us to know about you.
Okay. So I'm originally from Jamaica. My parents are both from Jamaica and Trinidad. I moved here in 2005 to do my undergrad in music therapy at Appalachian State University in Boone, North Carolina. um, but I graduated in 2009. And from there, worked in inpatient psych. I worked in memory care. I worked on in rehab and then in a hospital setting.
Okay.
So currently we're working in, or right before COVID happened, we were working with children all the way up to adults in the medical setting. So that's me.
And we have someone, I can't see who it is, but someone just said, woohoo, Trinidad.
Yay!
Oh, Cheyenne. Hey, Cheyenne. She says, woohoo, Trinidad. And Bethany says, yes, I love seeing this in an interactive Facebook Live format. Yeah. So
Oh,
please,
cool. Yeah.
yeah, drop your comments or drop songs that
Hmm.
you think that you're just kind of wondering about that you think
Yeah.
might be rooted in racism. Drop the names of some songs that maybe
Yeah,
you,
for sure. So we can
yeah.
like look it up together and figure it out together.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Awesome. So, um, okay, great. Now, if you don't mind me asking, when was the first time in your life or in your career when you noticed a song or a piece of music that was rooted in racism?
Um, I think it was pretty early on because there was a group that I was doing on like the history of songs, and it actually happened to be I've been working on the railroad, and someone wanted to know the history of the song, and when I saw it, I was like, oh, and that's a song that like you kind of grew up singing, and like no one is you're not really completely aware, but I think I know some of the lyrics were changed and that kind of thing. The chorus is pretty much the same, but the verses were different. And then with it pulling in like Dinah, that whole other song, I was shocked and kind of left out the rest of the history and just like kind of quickly moved on. And then I think after that, I came home and I was like looking on my computer. I was like, what is, you know, I was kind of surprised. It was kind of one of those moments where I should have known, but wasn't quite aware of it. And so I did a lot of searching. And I think over the years, when that song has come up, I'll say, well, I don't have that one, but here's another option that I have here. And I'll like read off a couple options. Yeah, that was my very early on
Early on
experience.
in your career,
Career.
when you were doing your
Yeah, I was a
um
professional then. So yeah.
yeah, and I always kind of put that song together with, well, so my grandfather had an eighth grade education, and then at eighth grade, he just started working on the railroad, and he worked, I mean, literally working on the railroad, and he worked on the railroad
Mm-hmm.
for his whole life until he was in the Marine Corps, and then he was in World War II, and then he came back and he kept working with
Mm-hmm.
railroad companies. And so I always just kind of put it with my grandpa and thinking, oh, it's a grandpa song, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I
yeah.
I didn't realize for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so
Yeah. Yeah.
so it was Working on the Railroad, which is such a popular song, and I mean, everybody knows the tune, and it's
Everyone knows it. Yeah, it's a very, very popular one. But the lyrics, if you just look up the original lyrics, because it's a part of, I think it was called the Old Leve song.
okay.
And it was a very popular song. I think it was in 1921 that it was like all over colleges and universities. And I was like, whoa, okay. um, but yeah, it's very interesting. And that's an example of taking the melody and kind of shifting it a little bit more. But it's the history of that song is it's shocking. So,
So I'm wondering, what are some ways you mentioned how you handled it in situations when it was
hmm
brought up in session. Um, I'm thinking, the reason I would always use it is because it's got this like strong, like kind of 1-2 beat.
yep.
Um, and what are some alternatives, not just to that song, but what are some alternatives that you have used?
hmm
Um, yeah.
I mean, when the Saints go marching in, there's so many. Like I know, like there's songs that are rooted in racism, but there's so much more out there. So, if you just do a quick search, if there's like many other folk songs that are not rooted in racism, and there's many gospel songs and that you can use with a strong beat for whatever your goal is. Um, you know, so I know sometimes we kind of get in as music therapists, we sometimes have like certain songs we use, and it's kind of hard to stray away from that, to get away from that. But it's such a good idea, and I learned this early on in my career because I did get stuck in that rut of using, I don't know, the same few songs for certain things, but I was like, man, I'm getting bored with this music. Let me see what else is out there. So I think it's very important to keep doing that, to keep learning new things and looking for music that have like good messages and still with the strong beat that you need for, I don't know, gait training or whatever your goal is there. But yeah, there's lots of other options for sure.
There are so many, I agree.
So
And so okay, so tell me about this. I know this wasn't on our list of questions, sorry, but this is
okay.
something to open up like a discussion, just a question there, to open up to you as a viewer. If you're in the audience, let us know. I'm curious because I saw in another forum in another Facebook group, someone said, "Oh gosh, I just stay away from African American spirituals in general." And
Yeah.
so, talk to me about, because this person was a white person, and discussing the discussing that. Should we not play African American spirituals if we're white?
Oh, you definitely should. I mean, like there's no, I mean, because then you'll be catering to one type of client, and that's what I've told my interns. Like you have to learn as much music as possible. We're serving white, black, everyone, and so like you have to cater to their needs. So and learning like different ways of accompanying yourself, and so I mean, there's so many great African spirituals out there. It's amazing. And just like there's there's all kinds of gospel. So don't limit yourself.
Don't limit
You know?
yourself. And I love the way
Yeah.
you brought it back to it's about the client. It's about the
Right.
client. And so
Right.
if you've got clients for
Hmm.
whom this music is meaningful,
Right.
then okay,
Yeah.
then by all means, definitely and learn it and learn the context and the history of the music,
Yeah,
right? And
definitely. And I mean, not it's, and they'll also respect you for doing that, for taking the time to come to them and work with them and help them with whatever emotional, whatever needs that they need. You know, because I mean, you have to put yourself in their shoes. If you like, for example, I love reggae. So if I am ever in a situation where I have a music therapist coming, you know, that's the first. Oh, like I really love some Bob Marley. So I would kind of expect you to go and learn some Bob Marley if you don't know it, um, and then bring it back. And like, you know, that's how you connect with your clients. You learn it's client preferred music. You learn what they like. And I guess people will also say, well, what if they like I've been working on a railroad? I'm like, well, they also like other things. So you can find what else they like, you know, what other options.
right,
Hmm.
right.
Hmm.
And so what is something you can say? Like, let's say a client comes in and says, the railroad song, let's do the railroad song. Then if you were role playing with me, what's a response, like a verbal response you
Oh,
that you can give
so
us?
say, well, you know, let's try this other one. This is one that I have that's just like it. What about When the Saints Go Marching In or something? Like, let's try that instead. And you know, I have had a client ask, well, you don't know that one? Why don't you know it? It's a very popular one. I'm like, well, actually, I do. And then you have to tread lightly because in some cases it is appropriate to educate, like it, but other cases it's just move on and find something else. But this client of mine was interested in knowing, and we looked it up together. And she's like, "Wow, I had no idea." So you know, educating the client, the patient, that's kind of on a individual one-on-one basis, like just to see if it's appropriate or not, I guess.
And do you mind sharing what setting where you looked it up with a client, like what setting would it be appropriate? Because I know if I'm working in a group and I'm in the moment
Mm-hmm.
of a bunch of older adults, then it would
Yeah.
be a little bit more difficult depending upon where they're at. But what setting have you found, did you find it to be comfortable to look it up with that client?
That was actually in the medical setting. You know, I'm sure. Trying to think back, like my memory care residents. You know, sometimes they have that moment of clarity, and you know, so if they're in that moment and they're really asking you, then why not? You know, there's a
Yeah,
way. There's a way to do it. So
there is a way
yeah,
to do it.
yeah,
Th-
yeah,
There is a way to do it. Okay, great.
yeah.
I know what I've done too is I love what you said about okay, yeah, yeah, the railroad song. Let's do one just like it, which is "When the Saints."
Right.
We're just bringing it back to okay, um, that one's got a good strong march beat. Let's march to "Oh When the Saints."
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Or there are so many ways to kind of
There's so many. Yeah, to change the topic, but gently, gently move it along.
so if you, okay, I have more questions for you, but we have someone tuning in who says this.
Okay.
Um, I've been scolded on social media by just saying that I was trying to learn hip hop songs. Any suggestions on this one?
She was scolded for trying to learn hip hop songs. I think that's great. I mean, I've definitely had clients who like hip hop songs. I don't think there's anything wrong. I mean, I know that like bad words and that kind of thing, but you can always, for a hip hop song, you can always find the what's the G-rated version? Is that the correct term?
If you need to search
There's
that.
Yeah, I mean, like there, especially like with teenagers. Like, you know, I had a teenager I was working with in a children's hospital probably a year ago, who liked that kind of like hardcore rap, and like He was going through a lot. And so we spoke about it. I'm like, okay, what about this song? Like, I don't rap. So we used recorded music here. But, and it was very like deep and like some curse words in there too. And we spoke about it and we got to a level and we figured it out as to why. I think there's a time and a place for everything. So if you're learning a hip hop song for a specific client that they requested, you know, ask them if there's curse words, like, does it mean, like, do you want the curse words in there? Should we find, or maybe ask them, can we find a different word to replace the F word, the other words and stuff like that. I,
So
I, you got, again, it's client preference. So if they, if they want it,
if they
and there's
want
lots
it,
of
then
yeah, if they want, there's lots of hip hop music that don't have that, that don't have bad words that are also very respectful. So can you do that way? So
so I have a question that's a little bit more difficult because I know I'm asking
yay,
hard
clap.
questions. Sorry. So I think what she might have been implying is that as a white music therapist,
Learning hip
um,
hop.
learning hip hop is that cultural appropriation. You know, so talk to us from your perspective, Tammy. Is it right for a white music therapist to learn a hip hop song or a rap song and use that in groups or individual sessions or
Yeah, I
how do you
mean,
feel about
again, it's going back to a white music therapist learning African spirituals, or you know, yes, like you should if the, again, going back to, if the client is asking for that, then by all means do it. I mean, I personally don't have an issue with white music therapists learning black music.
that?
So I think as music therapists, that's our job. You know, you have to meet the clients where they are, and if they're in that moment, really feeling a really angry hip hop song or just a hip hop song in general, then why not? And and again, black clients aren't the only ones that like hip hop. There are also white patients clients that like hip hop. So you know, I
So
personally don't see an issue with her learning that.
and maybe it would be good to I don't well for us to it's interesting because not everybody feels the same way
Right,
about this
right.
question. And so, you know, when we have another commenter here, Nate, hey Nate, he said, I'm so sad that they were scolded by someone for learning hip hop
Mm,
songs. Sounds like the scolder has some personal work to do. Well, and so everybody has a different
that's true.
feeling on this. And so
Hmm.
perhaps um, when I think of cultural appropriation, I think of using bits or even a larger piece of another culture in a way where you're really uninformed, um,
Hmm.
and which can be really offensive.
Right.
You guys, commenters, viewers, you know, draw what is cultural appropriation to you? Um, Let us know what your opinions are. So, for example, going into a session um, and using like a different type of talking, like a different kind of accent. You know, actually, I always find myself putting on the Southern accent. Like sometimes I'll just say, you know, they ain't ready for that. Or I'll just say something, but I'm like, wait, it's okay. I'm from Georgia. I'm from Georgia. Like I literally
Right,
grew up in
right.
this culture. This is part of my culture, saying ain't, saying y'all,
Yeah,
um,
yep.
saying, you know, and so I have to stop and think, oh yeah, no, this is part of my culture. I'm okay to say this.
Right.
So I think if you went in and used hip hop I don't know, like what would be not okay for a music therapist who is like maybe we wouldn't consider that music therapist part of like hip hop culture and like what would be not okay? What would be an example?
What, so what would not be okay is assuming, making assumptions that based on a person's race, background, that they like a certain kind of music without asking them first. You're making the assumption based on looking. So, and I mean, that's happened to me in like, and it's from the client or patient looking at me saying, you know that song? Like that? Like a, how do you know this? Like, so,
Oh, how do you know that song? Because it's not part of your culture. And you're
right.
like, well, how do you know it's
How do
not
you
part of my
know?
culture?
Exactly. So that's when, if you flip it, that's when it's inappropriate, is if you see a black client, a white client, and assume that they like hip hop or that they like, I don't know, whatever else. But,
Yeah. African American African spirituals or whatever,
right.
like rap, hip hop you
What
mentioned. So making assumptions about that person's
making
preference.
assumptions. That's probably, yeah. And that's when you should not do that. Don't do that, but ask the question. That's when you get to know the patient, the client, like, what kind of music do you like? That's usually the first question that should come out of your mouth. um, so that's when that becomes inappropriate, is making those assumptions.
Thank you. Okay, that really makes sense. Making assumptions and I'll just add coming into it using that music in a like in a mocking fashion,
Right.
which goes without saying, but I'll just say it. I'll just say it here too.
Right.
If using country music in a mocking fashion, or using hip hop and rap in a mocking
Right.
fashion,
Right.
um, would also okay. So making assumptions, turning it into a mockery or a joke of some sort.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and someone says, "Thank you, Tammy, for having this conversation with me." By the way, these
You're welcome.
are like really everybody's asking really hard
Yeah.
questions,
Yeah.
really hard,
It's,
really good ones, and I think it's really important just to open up the discussion
yeah,
and all.
for sure.
I hope this is okay if I speak on behalf of both of us, where we'll get some things wrong in this discussion, but
Yep.
let's talk. Let's talk.
Let's
Let's
talk.
let's
These
pull
are the
to
times. These are the times that we're in. So we need to talk about things. We need to discuss these things. And this is a hard conversation to have. It's uncomfortable, which is what inspires change. So,
yes, the discomfort inspires change.
yep.
Tammy Flo. Um, Gwen says, I hope this is okay to ask, but I have clients who love Mr. Bojangles. I looked up the history to the song, but I'm still unsure if this one is appropriate. Thoughts? And honestly, off the top of my head, I don't know the lyrics
Yeah. Let me
specifically.
look.
Okay, so
Let me.
she's going to look that up while I look at more comments. Um, Beth says, often instead of me trying to replicate the music authentically, I offer listening to the original artist and discussing. So for rap and hip hop, if it's difficult to or if it doesn't feel authentic to
Right.
replicate, then just use
Yes.
the original music. That's a great solution, Beth.
There's
Um,
certain things that I will not try to recreate because I wouldn't do it justice. So that's where the recorded music comes in. Let's see.
exactly. So while she looks that up, I'm going to read some more comments. Stephanie says, as a white music therapist, if I play music from another culture, especially if it's non-white, I take a lot of care to learn about it from an ethnomusicology perspective, or as many people are calling it musicology,
Yep.
since musicology, ethnomusicology is just musicology. I love that, Stephanie. Thank you. For example, I took a series of circle singing, scat singing workshops, and I continue to play a black jazz singer to teach me to. Oh, so you've hired a professional singer who is black to deepen those skills. That's wonderful, Stephanie. Thanks for sharing that.
That's good. Yeah. That's really good.
And cool, she's looking up the lyrics to Mr. Bojangles here, while Victoria Storm says, as a white woman, I've used We Shall Overcome as a song of resilience with all clients. In recent weeks, I have avoided doing this song, wondering if I should not use it. Sounds like I'm okay to use it. And like we said, everybody has a different opinion on this. And I'm not sure, just like ethics are not black and white.
Right. It's always a gray area with ethics. Always. Um, Mr. Bojangles, I'm looking at the history. So it's written by Jerry Jeff Walker. He wrote the song after an encounter with a street performer in New Orleans, or did I say that right? New Orleans jail. I can't say that right. While in jail for public intoxication in 1965. And he met a homeless man who called himself Mr. Bojangles to conceal his true identity from the police. I think this one might be okay. And let me look at the lyrics. He jumped so high, so he lightly touched down. I met him in a cell in New Orleans, so I was down and out. I mean, I think it's okay. This might be a good one for a lyric analysis, too. Just a thought.
Yeah. So in our 5-minute research here of Mr. Bojangles,
it seems okay. I'm looking
for now. But
yeah,
definitely do deeper research into it, for sure. Thanks, Tammy, for looking that up. So great. Okay, now, well, here's someone who says, what are your thoughts on censorship and what is appropriate? So Mary says, I had a room of adolescent Black clients shout at me in unison that the N-word wasn't a curse word and shouldn't be censored.
Okay. So the N-word is used in some hip hop. I personally don't use it. And again, it's kind of going back to. I had a discussion with a friend of mine probably a few months ago about the use of that word in a lot of hip hop songs, and I think I don't agree with it, and that's just me. And for those adolescents, maybe it was a good place to educate and say, well, that's kind of a derogatory term, so I don't feel comfortable using it. And it's fine to tell your clients that. It's fine to tell them if you don't feel comfortable saying the F word or the other word, any word. It's fine to tell them that, and that's within your boundary. That's within your right to say that as a therapist. So, personally, I don't like the use of the N-word in songs. But maybe someone else could chime in on that. But I think if she's not comfortable using it, don't do it. Just say, I knew. You could say something like, I knew that, but because it's a derogatory term, I don't feel comfortable using it. And then maybe open that up for a discussion. Like, what do you know of the history of that word? I personally feel like we should stop using that word in songs, to be honest, because it's
because of its roots.
Yeah.
That word has some deep roots.
Yeah, I mean, since we're talking about the roots of songs, I mean that is a deep rooted word. So
for sure. Mm-hmm. So and that's kind of that's I guess, I mean, it's similar to talking about music rooted in racism, but when it's your clients, I would also say talk to the facility administrators, talk to your superiors at that facility, and have that discussion. And you can always, if they say they're going to use it no matter what, I mean, talk to your facility administrators and ask them, what are the rules around this? And you can set your own rules for yourself and not use probably.
I'm pretty sure the facility would probably not be okay with the use of that word. I'd be surprised if they would be. Again, there's so many ways that you can take that and twist it. So you can say that you're not comfortable using it, but you can also make it into a discussion about the word and what do you guys think this means? And why does it mean so much to you that I use the word, and so on. You can take that further and get to the root, is what I'm saying. So
great. Okay, how about, Alicia says, I think it depends on the level and depth of therapeutic relationship you have with the client. Well, I think she's talking about I think she's talking about using music from cultures other than your own here, not the N word on this
Oh,
one, I think.
okay. Yeah.
And then she says, if you have a relationship, it may be appropriate to seek feedback from the client about what they think about that, about you, about the therapist using music from a culture other than his or her own,
Hmm.
their own. I had a client once who came to me and expressed that as a biracial person, she didn't like the fact that I was using the term black. We were talking about the civil rights movement and asked if I would use the term people of color instead. I was so grateful that she trusted me and our relationship enough to have that conversation. It was a beautiful moment for us and our journey together. Wow. And that's,
Yeah, that's so I yeah, so I guess some people don't like the term black, but um I think either one is fine. I'm fine using both, black or persons of color. Yeah, that's another discussion too. It just depends on what you're comfortable. I'm not sure why people wouldn't like the term black, is what I'm also wondering. Yeah, maybe I should research that a little bit more.
and how would you
But
feel? So, I mean, if you're a client, how would you feel if a white music therapist asked you, do you prefer the term black person or the term person of color?
right.
Um, I mean,
I mean, that's a good you can,
isn't it a
there's nothing
question?
wrong with asking the question. I think that's a good question to ask. Yeah, I'm sure that's fine.
Mhm.
I personally don't mind either one.
Yeah,
But I get it's getting back to finding out what they're comfortable with, and you know, yeah,
yeah. And
ask the questions. I think it's good questions to ask for sure.
Stephanie says, uh, she says, I'd also say context plays a role, and your gut feelings might tell you something. I've changed song choices based on context or what's happening and a desire to honor that, and especially my BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, People of Color clients. It's good to sit with and try to find out your why, I think.
Hmm.
Victoria's wondering, what site do you use to research tunes? Is there one that you go? I mean, I kind of
Just Google.
I've just been using Google. We've just been using Google and kind of landing
Yeah,
at different to
yeah,
see.
Google and then you know, search the lyrics and stuff, but just like click through and see what other articles pop up based on what you know the song.
Yeah.
But there's a lot out there. But just good old Google.
Yeah. Brittany says, I think we should make it standard to say how we identify pronouns and ethnicity, maybe. I guess,
Hmm.
it would be ideal to do that, but everybody has different preferences, right?
Hmm.
Such as the client that was described, client that we described before who preferred person of color to black.
Right.
Now she was biracial, or they. I don't know if it was a
They
he,
were
she, or
by.
they.
Hmm.
So they were biracial.
Oh, well, maybe
So
that's. Let me see. Maybe that. Yeah, that would make sense then.
so
Um,
do we call all biracial individuals persons of color? But I don't know if there is a standard because there may be
it de-
a biracial person who prefers to be called black.
right. So again, that's
Okay.
going into the. So my son, for example, is biracial, and it's kind of going back into what he will one day prefer to call himself, whether it's black or white or mixed, biracial. But it just says here, person of color is a term used to describe anyone who's not considered white. So African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, Native Americans, and so on. So yeah,
Um,
I think that's great.
So we have
Just
another question on how to open the
mhm.
dialogue on racist music with a generation who has no memory of their racist roots. Like, for example, this person never knew about Song of the South growing up, songs like Zippity Doodah were sanitized from Mickey Mouse shows on Disney Channel. So she
Mm-hmm.
said, so this person says, I can imagine that many white college students have similarly clean memories of this music, and it might even be special to them. So then a defensiveness is bound to come up when you learn that an innocent children's song is actually harmful. So the question from the beginning is how to open up a dialogue on racist music with a generation who has no memory of their racist roots.
Well, again, it's a great opportunity for education, and you kind of have to take things slowly too. I mean, so if you're in a session and they're asking for that song, just say, well, I don't have that one, but here's another one. Or if they are really insisting on hearing that song, say, well, let's talk about the history of that song. Did you know? And so on. Usually you can redirect, but if they're insisting on hearing that song, then you can educate and say, well, let's look up the history. Let's find out about this one. What do you like about this one? What is it your childhood? And so on. So there's like a few different ways to take that, because that will come up, I'm sure. So
I like your question of what about this song is meaningful to you that you said, or what do you like about this song? Because
mm-hmm.
whatever they say, you can take that and pivot.
Yes. Yep. So
And
it
then
could be a memory of, I don't know, their mom singing to them or whatever it is, but just finding like, what do you like about it? Like, what is it? And then take that. So
that way you have like whatever you're going to pivot to, you have the different music in your back
mm-hmm.
pocket while
Mm-hmm.
you discuss that current song that they
Yep.
brought up.
Yep.
But you're still like, okay, I have this other song in my back pocket that I know I can
Mm-hmm.
pivot um, to um, to help facilitate the same feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
So while they're answering the question, you have your brain starting to work, like come up with other
Yeah.
ideas.
This is why therapy, sometimes being a therapist is so exhausting, right? Because
It is. It's like your
you're,
brain is divided. Like
you're juggling so
it is.
many things. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a really good question here. This is a really good one. Okay. This person says, I remember a popular affirmation song going around the music therapy circle that used the tune for shortening bread,
Oh
which
yeah.
has problematic roots. So the question is changing the lyrics enough, or is the tune itself problematic? And
So I used to think that just changing the lyrics was enough. However, I've since changed my mind because I've been working on the railroad. Is from the old Leve song, so that song is the melody. So you're keeping you're keeping a part of the song and putting your own lyrics into it. So the song is still there. Personally, I don't think it's okay. Because in that group, as we're singing that song, what if there was a person of color, a black person who was like, whoa, 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 that is not an okay song to be singing. Then what do you do? So I think you have to respect all clients. So you have to. So if the song could be damaging for one client, then it shouldn't be in there. It shouldn't be used. That's just my opinion. Some other people might disagree and say we can change the words. But I know for me it would be offensive. So again, you're putting yourself in their shoes, and like how would that person feel if here we are singing this song and it's very, very racist in nature. So
right. And
yeah.
there are two things that come to mind when you're mentioning this, Tammy. One is, so let's say you walk into a group and it's all white people. Then you're like, oh, great, I can use all the racist songs. No,
No.
so,
No.
so because white people have friends who are black people. White people are often offended by, like, we should
Yeah.
be offended
Right.
by racism. And that's what the anti-racist movement is all about, as I'm
Right.
learning, as I'm
Right.
continuing to learn and move forward. And,
Right.
but so, as you know, white people in your group could be offended on behalf of their black friends.
Exactly.
Um, but even if they're not offended on behalf of their black friends, I
Mhm.
feel like as a therapist, I'm offended on behalf of my clients
Right.
who have been oppressed. And so that's one thing that comes to mind is like, okay, well, great. I don't have any black, indigenous, or people of color in this group. No, no, no. Like,
No.
no.
Yeah. You don't know if like what you don't know what their background is. You don't.
Yeah.
So
And even
yeah.
if you do know their
Hmm.
background, we were always taught in school to use music that's pro-social, like pro-social. And so now that, like the Maya Angelou quote goes, when you know
You do
better, you
better.
do
Yep.
better.
Hmm.
And we haven't always known better. I mean,
Right.
goodness, we have
Yeah.
not. I have not. I'll speak for myself only. I have
Right.
not always known better. And
Right.
what I know now, it's like, oh, if I had only known what I know now, if I had only known
Yeah.
that 10 years ago or even 5 years ago,
Absolutely. Yeah.
um, you
I
know,
think we're always learning new things. I mean, I would never say that I know everything. I feel like even now with everything that's going on, I feel like I'm still learning new things. You know, and yeah, it's just very interesting times, and it's great to be having this discussion because there's so much music out there. I'm sure there's music that I'm not even aware of that has that background. So
me too.
it would be interesting to just keep going back into practice and just saying, let me just look up the song real quick just to make sure that it's okay. So
Right?
so hopefully people do that more to be more mindful of things. So
Yes. Um, okay, so we have some more great comments and really good discussion here. This person, I can't see who their name is, but that's okay. I had a white older client in internship who would mention some pretty offensive racial slurs, just despite the focus being on the music in the session. Um, they most likely had dementia. Should this be addressed at all with the client aside from mentioning the incident to supervisors, therapists, and caregivers? So she's asked, so
yeah,
this person is asking, like,
what do
should
you do?
and what do you
Basically,
do?
yeah.
Yeah, so this person, I've always wondered if there's a way to address this because it made me very uncomfortable as a student intern and did not want to upset the client. And having a conversation about racism is hard.
It is hard. So you're dealing with a population who, because I worked in memory care. I definitely had that instance, and sometimes it was directed at me because I'm black. But I, with that population, I don't think there's much education that you can do, unless again they have that moment of clarity when you can say, "Hey, that's really inappropriate." You could probably say that, but then move on because you're just going to be going around in a circle and they're not going to understand. They probably think that they're back in those days, and I've had my own share of like comments to me and about me and all of that in that setting, and after that too. But it's very uncomfortable because I was too, and I think that what you do is say, that's not really inappropriate, but let's move on to something else and just move it along, redirect. That's the key thing with that population is to redirect and move along. And yes, you can make their caregivers aware of what happened, and if it was in a group setting and if it was upsetting other clients, maybe you have more one-on-one with that client separately. So you have to like kind of think of if it was in a group setting. In my case, it was. So that's what I'm drawing. So so I separated, worked with that person, worked with and then brought them back to the group. So sometimes that if you're able to do that,
And this is
if
a client who used a racial slur towards you. Mm.
yep. And again, in that moment, it's like I can't get mad because they're just not aware of what's going on completely right now. So I said that's really inappropriate, but let's keep moving. Let's get on to the next thing. And it stopped. I didn't draw much more attention to it. It stopped. We moved on and so on, and it was fine. So and it happened a couple more times after that, and we had to do some other things, and separate the group and stuff like that. But I think if you draw more attention to it in that setting, the worse it becomes, in my experience. So I think once you redirect quickly, just make it plain and clear and then move on, then I think that's probably the best thing to do in that case. So
thanks for sharing from your perspective, because as a white person, I've never had a racial slur said towards me. I've had sexist things, but it's different. It's different. It's not the same,
right.
By any means, by any stretch of the imagination. And so I think it really helps for us to hear what that's like to be the therapist and have clients use racial slurs against you.
Yeah. I even had a client say, "Hey, for a Black girl, you can play that guitar." I was like, "Oh, thanks." And I just kept going. I was like, not paying attention to that. It's fine. And that was not on the memory care unit, but it's fine.
What does that even mean anyway? Yeah, no, let's just not even get it.
I don't even know, but it was fine.
Yeah. Well, so I think kind of what I want to reflect is the accommodation that you have been, that you have had to provide to not just your clients, but people who have perpetuated racism, probably in your like accommodation. And I can't imagine how exhausting that must be.
Yeah, definitely. It has been. It can be, and hopefully we'll get better from here going out, but we'll see.
So Beth shares this quote, and she shared this with me before privately too. This is such a great quote. She says, "I think this quote really captures our duty as musicians and therapists." Quote, she says, "Pull the weeds of injustice and evil, plant so much beauty that it chokes out the poison."
Yep. That's a great one.
Whew.
I love that.
It's such a good one. And she says, "I believe it came from a graduation address given by musician Andrew Peterson this year." So great.
That's a great one. Man, we can use that. We can just like remember that right now.
Right. I know.
Moving forward.
Definitely. Just plant so much beauty. Brittany says, "I really appreciate that guidance. I was given similar advice in the time because it was a regular thing that happened. This person using racial slurs. I believe in some group settings it was lightly addressed with clients that were offended to support them." Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
So, cool. Let me see if I've missed any comments or questions. Someone is saying the melody is still a reference and is still identifiable. So if we're talking about like replacing the lyrics, but still the melody is a reference and is still identifiable. So, a tough one. So Tammy and I were talking about a really tough one before we went live, which is Bad Bad Black Sheep, because it is the same melody.
Yep.
as our favorite ABCs and Twinkle Twinkle.
I know it is. Oh man, that's a tough one because I didn't know that till like right before. I was like, "Oh, Black Sheep."
Yeah, that one was kind of like a last minute. Oh, oh wow, Baba. So Baba Black Sheep is questionable. One of the lyrics talks about one for the master and one for the dame, one for the little boy who lives down the lane. And so it has a questionable past. There is a document swimming around on music rooted in racism, music with songs with a questionable past, and then a great article that sparked this whole discussion in our leaders group in the first place. So I'll share the links to all of those in the caption of this video when we're done recording.
Great.
But someone is mentioning, I think the melody is actually more evocative than the lyrics. We can sing the sanitized version if someone knows the racist lyrics and melody is going to recall it. Oh, I mean, this is a tough one.
So I'm looking at the history of this one. Says the classic nursery rhyme has attracted recent controversy as it was believed to be politically incorrect, but most scholars agree that it has little to do with the slave trade. The most common conclusion is that it's actually about the great custom, which was a tax on wool in the 13th century. Under the new taxes, the price of a sack of wool was split between the farmer, king, and church. So I guess why wouldn't they say farmer then instead of master? But
Oh, so Celeste is saying
um,
Baba is an old English song in my research, feudal taxes. So she's saying maybe
yeah,
master in old English world.
probably
So,
said meant something else.
hmm.
And none for the little boys who cries down the lane.
So,
Oh, if you consider the original last line was, and none for the little boy who cries down the lane, indicating that the poor shepherd boys were left with no profits due to the heavy tax.
oh, okay. So it's an old English one. So they're referring to master, not in the sense
Not
of,
in the sense of the slave trade. So, I mean, this one we could probably research some more, but from what I found, that was not the original meaning of it.
not
Like,
necessarily rooted in
not,
racism. Thank
right.
you for pointing that out, Celeste, and
Yeah,
thank you
thank
for
you.
researching that, Tammy. And
Yeah.
yeah, Heather's chiming in like, oh, good to know. And I'm like, oh, thank goodness,
Oh, thank God.
because ABC's right,
I
doing that one
know.
every day.
I know, I know.
Um, and someone says, and I'm sorry, sometimes I can see your names and sometimes I cannot. So I apologize if I'm not naming you. But someone says, yes, regardless of whether a group or client could be offended or is offended, we know it's damaging to our BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color clients and colleagues.
Hmm.
So that kind of music should be
Right.
avoided. And this is, the question of censorship keeps coming up in these discussions.
Hmm.
And in my opinion, this isn't about censorship. But what's your take on that? Tammy, because people, just to play devil's, play the other, someone saying, but does this
Yeah.
mean we're just going to censor a bunch of music and we're just going to like wipe it out of all?
No, I mean, but here it's not really about that. It's you know that these songs have a background that is not okay, and you may still choose to use them. That's the issue. That is the problem. It's not. There's so much more music out there. You shouldn't need to use "I've Been Working on the Railroad." You shouldn't need to use "Oh Susanna." You shouldn't need to use "Camptown Races." Like, it's you know better.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be harsh, but we know the background, and like, it shouldn't even be on your repertoire list. If you give a list out, don't even have it on there. Don't have it as an option. There's so much more out there. So it's not. It's just we know better. Now that we're learning about this type of music, we know better. So let's do better.
Right. Right.
Like,
Exactly.
make it a point to research the history of your songs. Like, there's a fun group you can do with your clients and do the history. Like, sing a song. What's the history of it? Like, there's great stuff to be done there. So
So
yeah,
many alternatives. And this is a
so
separate
many.
conversation from censorship. This isn't about
This
censorship.
is not about censorship.
This is about knowing better so we do better as
Yeah.
therapists on the ground. We are on the ground working hands on with our clients. And, this isn't about, yeah. So Celeste mentions that, oh, Mr. Joe Bojangles, blah, blah,
Bojangles.
blah. Mr.
Bojangles.
Bojangles was made famous by Sammy Davis Jr. And from her research, it sounds like it was not rooted in racism, but everybody do your own research on that just to make sure.
Right.
Brittany says it's possible to alter the melody enough to vary where it is rooted to. I'm just thinking, add improv to ethically continue to use Twinkle Twinkle. I'm really glad we're considering where these songs come from.
Yeah.
Heather says, yes, so much music out there. We know better. Yes. And so the same way we can pivot by Tammy, when you said, ask the client what makes that song special to you? What do you like about that song? Take whatever the client says and then pivot onto other music.
Yeah.
We can do that in improvisation too. So it's like, okay, the client is asking for this, I think I read somewhere about Louie Louie. Being
Oh yeah.
questionable. Well, let's say it is, just for example, and do your
Mm-hmm.
own research to find out whether it is. I don't know details, but let's say it is, just for the sake of conversation. Let's say the client's like, oh, do Louie Louie, and then I'm like, okay. Then I'm thinking, well, while I have this discussion with this client, I'm already thinking of what are the musical elements of this
Yep.
song. that I can use to pivot to another song in the same genre or similar genre, where we can improvise on top, or kind of change it, like make that shift in the practice.
I think also, I think people need to, for whoever is still wanting to use some of these songs, I think it's important that you look at the history of Black minstrelsy songs. I think I said that correctly. And also watch on Netflix The 13th. It's about the 13th Amendment. I think after you watch that and you look up the history, you'll say, oh, I will never do this again. Because again, we know better. Let's do better. So that's my 2 cents on that.
We watched the 13th. We watched the 13th like a week ago, and is really eye-opening. Really
Very much
eye-opening.
so.
So
it's crazy. It's crazy. It's
stuff that
hard.
you
It's
would
a hard watch.
never. It's a hard watch. It's
It's a
stuff
hard
that you
watch.
cannot even imagine and you cannot even make up.
Yeah.
So, yes, definitely watch 13th. Okay, so watch 13th and look up the history of some of these songs. Is what
Yes.
is
Or
what
the
you're saying.
black minstrels, because that's where all of these come from. Is that's what they started
Specific.
doing specifically? That when that happened, that has to do with blackface and all, and that's where all of this stuff started. So
Yes. Okay, so look that
as entertainment. So
as entertainment.
yeah.
Here's Bonnie.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, and we don't like to be called entertainers. So just want to,
Right.
so just, you should look that up.
Exactly. And you will be offended for our friends,
Yes.
who are BIPOC.
Yes.
If you're, yes. Okay. So, thank you for this conversation. The intention of our music choices is important. Jingle Bells was surprising for me because it's on the list of questionables. But like discussed, there are so many more options, and maybe options to create new songs that celebrate positive messages. So pro-social music.
Wait, I didn't know about Jingle Bells. That's new to me.
Yeah, check that one out. There's another person who says there are several music therapists who were not able to sign in this morning. Are you? Oh, yeah. I mean, this video is going to be up in this group, in this Facebook group, forever. We're not taking it down or anything like that. So yeah, don't worry. You'll always be able to reference this video and this interview with Tammy. And like I said, I'm going to add those resources to the caption of this video when we're done recording so that everybody kind of has a place to go to. I've got to make sure that I give credit where credit is due to the people who originally shared them. And so that'll take me just a few minutes after we're done with the recording. Okay, Tammy. Where are you at? Right? Are you at Jingle Bells? Or are you? Oh,
I was just looking at it. I'll look after this. It's fine. I was like, whoa.
Okay. I know. Some are really surprising to all of us. Okay. Great. And another resource for this is the New York Times podcast 1619, The Birth of American Music. Okay, great. So that's good
awesome
to know. Thank you for sharing that, Alicia. And Tara, welcome to the video. Thanks for chiming in, Tara, and everyone. We're almost at the 60-minute mark, so it might be time to wrap it up unless, Tammy, is there anything else? And you guys in the comments below, I think we've brought up, is this about censorship? We've brought up, but my clients love it, but their preference, we have to consider client preference, and I think we've touched on that. And the whole point is move to pro-social. I've never had a client say, you're not going to play the Railroad song for me. Can you please, I'm not going to be here. I'm going to leave. I've never had a client say that. So we've touched on a lot of things. We've listened to Tammy from her perspective, talk about what it's like to have a client use racial slurs against her. So I think that's really valuable for us to hear. If whether you're white or black or anything, whatever your background is, I think it's really valuable for us to hear these stories. So thank you, Tammy, for opening a window into your world so that we can be better allies. And we can be united as a field in what we do.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
This has been great. And if
yeah.
anyone else has more questions, feel free to message me. You can find me on Facebook or wherever.
Yeah.
This was
Yeah. And
fun, Kat. This was a
this
great
is
conversation.
this was super fun, Tammy. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. And yeah, thanks for being my guest. I appreciate it. So I'll also make sure to mention Tammy in the captions so that you have access to contacting her if you'd like to. So I appreciate your willingness to do that too. I think. Okay, we have another person who says, oh yeah. So we'll go ahead and sign off, and you can always watch this video. It will be forever available in this Facebook group. So I will talk to you guys later. Thanks so much. I got a crying baby, so this is good timing.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining us.